Chapter 1. The Storm. The highway stretched endlessly before me, a gray ribbon cutting through the Cascade Mountains like a scar. Rain hammered against the windshield of my battered Honda Civic, each drop sounding like an accusation. Run, run, run. I'd been driving for 14 hours straight, and my eyes burned with the kind of exhaustion that comes from crying more than sleeping. Behind me, Seattle disappeared into the November darkness, and with it, the life I'd carefully constructed over the past 3 years. A life that had shattered the moment Daniel texted me a photo of himself and Miranda at the courthouse. Miranda, my best friend. My brideswoman, my betrayer. The ceremony was supposed to be tomorrow. Tomorrow. Our venue was booked. My dress hung in a garment bag at the cleaners. My mother had already started drinking champagne at the hotel we'd reserved for the rehearsal dinner. And Daniel? Daniel had been too much of a coward to tell me face to face. Just a photo and 4 words, "I'm sorry. Forgive me." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, watching the road dissolve into sheets of rain. Maybe I should pull over. Maybe I should call someone. Maybe I should... The deer materialized from nowhere. It stepped directly into my path, eyes wide and luminous in the darkness, and I instinctively swerved. My tires lost purchase on the wet asphalt. The car spun, once, twice, and then gravity took over. The guardrail approached at terrifying speed. Time fractured into moments of crystalline clarity. I was going to die. I was going to die on a highway in the mountains, alone and heartbroken, and no one would even know to look for me for days. My mother would find out through a police report. Daniel would feel guilty for approximately 5 minutes before Miranda consoled him. The car broke through the guardrail with the groan of twisting metal. Then there was falling. Then there was impact. I woke to the taste of blood and the sound of rain. My eyes wouldn't open at first. When they finally did, the world swam in grayscale and pain. I was in my car, or what was left of it. The windshield had become a spiderweb of cracks, and the interior smelled like gasoline and copper. My left side screamed with a pain so intense it didn't feel real. Broken ribs, maybe. Possibly my arm. I needed help. I needed my phone. With trembling fingers, I reached for the passenger seat where I'd tossed it hours ago. It was dark. No signal. Of course, no signal. This close to the mountains, in a car wrapped around a tree 20 feet below the highway, I tried to move. Mistake. The pain bloomed into something magnificent and terrible, and I gasped, which meant moving my ribs, which sent me spiraling into darkness again. When I surfaced the second time, something had changed. The rain had stopped, or I'd become numb to it. My vision kept blurring, clearing, blurring again. The window was shattered completely now, which meant I could hear the forest, the night sounds, the wind in the trees, the croak of distant frogs, the rustle of undergrowth. That rustle came closer. My survival instinct apparently wasn't completely offline. I tensed or tried to. Fear spiked through the fog of pain. Something was moving through the forest toward me. Something large, a bear. It had to be a bear, or a mountain lion, or... The creature emerged from the tree line, and my mind couldn't quite catalog what I was seeing. It was massive. 4-legged, covered in dark fur that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Its eyes were intelligent, predatory. Those eyes locked onto mine, and I felt something slip beneath my ribs. Not pain this time, but something else. Something that felt almost like recognition. A wolf. It was a wolf, and I was going to die, except I wasn't afraid anymore. That should have terrified me more than the animal itself. But it didn't. There was something in that gaze that bypassed logic entirely. Something primal that answered a call buried deep in my chest, underneath the heartbreak and the trauma, and the terrible, crushing knowledge that I'd been utterly alone. The wolf stepped closer. Its massive head, easily the size of my own torso, leaned into the shattered window. I could smell it now, pine and earth and something wild, something that made my exhausted body respond in ways I couldn't explain. The animal's breath came out in plumes, warm against the cold night air. "Hi," I whispered. My voice sounded strange, distant. "I'm not very good company right now." The wolf made a sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. Something between the two. Its eyes never left mine. and in them I saw something that looked terrifyingly like concern. "I'm dying," I continued, the words spilling out in the way they do when you've reached the end of your ability to pretend. "Or I'm going to die. I crashed my car because I was running away from my fiancé. Well, my ex-fiancé as of this afternoon. He cheated on me with my best friend, and I didn't even scream at him or throw things. I just got in my car and drove. And now look at me." Fitting metaphor for my life, honestly. Running toward oblivion. The wolf pushed its snout further into the car, and impossibly, I raised my good arm. My fingers found the space between its eyes, soft fur meeting my skin. The contact sent a jolt through me. Electricity, recognition, wrongness, rightness, all at once. "I don't even know what you are," I whispered. The wolf pulled back suddenly, as if my words had burned. I watched, confused through the haze of pain and exhaustion, as it turned and disappeared back into the forest. I was alone again, but only for a moment. The sound of an engine, distant, grew steadily louder. Headlights swept across the twisted metal of my car. A truck pulled over on the highway above, and I heard a door slam. "Hello?" A man's voice, sharp with authority. "Is anyone down there?" I tried to respond, but my voice had abandoned me entirely. The footsteps came closer, careful on the rain-slicked slope. A figure emerged from the darkness, and for a moment, I saw him in silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the grace of someone completely in control of their body. When he stepped into the shaft of moonlight, I nearly gasped. He was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen, with dark hair and features carved from stone. His eyes were pale gray-blue, and when they found mine, I felt that same jolt of recognition I'd experienced with the wolf. Except this time, it was accompanied by absolute, bone-deep certainty. No, that wasn't possible. "Jesus," he breathed, already moving toward me. "Can you hear me? My name is Ash. You're going to be okay. I'm going to get you out of here." And as he knelt beside me, his large hand careful against my shoulder, I could have sworn I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something golden and wild and utterly inhuman. Something that matched the color of the wolf's eyes, right before it had touched me in the darkness. Chapter 2. The Sanctuary. The next 72 hours existed in fragments. There was the hospital, bright lights and questions I couldn't answer. A fractured left arm, 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and enough lacerations to require 43 stitches. The doctor said I was lucky. Lucky. As if luck had anything to do with surviving a car crash while your life was imploding. There was a police officer asking about the deer that caused the accident, and me realizing I couldn't actually remember if it had been a deer or something else entirely. The whole thing felt dreamlike, impossible to reconstruct. And then there was Ash. He'd been there when the ambulance arrived, staying with me in the ER until visiting hours ended. His presence a solid, grounding thing in the chaos of pain and morphine. He'd given the hospital his information, claimed to be a family friend, and somehow that had been enough. In my drugged state, I hadn't questioned it. When I was discharged on the 3rd day, against the doctor's recommendations. But my insurance had other ideas. He was waiting in the lobby. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. I was in a wheelchair, my left arm in a sling, wearing borrowed scrubs because my clothes had been cut off me in the ER. "Yeah, no insurance? And apparently that means I'm well enough to go. Where?" I didn't have an answer. My phone had been destroyed in the crash, and I hadn't had the strength to call my mother yet. The thought of telling her the wedding was off, that I'd driven off a cliff like a character in a soap opera, made me want to crawl back into a hospital bed and never leave. "I don't know," I admitted. Ash crouched in front of the wheelchair, those pale eyes studying me with an intensity that made my breath catch. He was wearing dark jeans and a black Henley that clung to a chest that looked carved from marble, and his dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd just showered. Up close, I could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the sharp cut of his cheekbones, the way his eyes seemed to hold depths I couldn't fathom. "Come with me," he said quietly. "I have a cabin. Quiet. Safe. You can recover properly there, and when you're ready, you can figure out your next steps." Every survival instinct should have screamed at me. I didn't know this man. He'd appeared at the crash like something from a dream. But beneath the logic, Beneath the rational voice telling me this was insane, something else was speaking. Something primal and ancient that recognized him as safe. As right, why would you do that? I asked. Because you need help, and I can provide it. His hand reached out, and for a moment I thought he'd touch my face. Instead, he took my good hand gently. And because fate doesn't usually give me a second chance at things, Elise, I'm not going to waste this one. I should have asked how he knew my name. I'd never given it to him, but I didn't. The cabin was 30 miles outside of Ashford, nestled in a valley where the mountains created a natural bowl that seemed to exist outside of time. It was beautiful in the way that wild things are beautiful, untamed and honest, with floor-to-ceiling windows that opened onto a forest so dense it looked like it went on forever. "Welcome home," Ash said, carrying me across the threshold, because I still couldn't navigate stairs without pain medication that made me drowsy. Home. The word landed wrong in my chest, too intimate, too loaded. But I didn't correct him. The interior was open and sparse, all exposed wood beams and stone fireplaces. The furniture looked expensive but lived in, and there were books everywhere. Psychology texts, mythology, folklore, things on indigenous cultures and ancient languages. The bedroom he'd prepared for me was on the main floor, blessedly accessible. "I don't want to impose," I said as he settled me onto the bed, a massive four-poster thing with linens that smelled like cedar. "You're not." He arranged the pillows with surprising gentleness for someone so large. "I work from home most days. I have a security company. Remote mostly, so I'm here anyway." Over the following week, I began to understand that Ash existed in deliberate contradiction to everything I'd expected. He was quiet, but not cold. Present, but not intrusive. He brought me meals, simple, healthy things that didn't aggravate my ribs, and sat with me while I ate without demanding conversation. He helped me bathe, keeping his eyes respectfully averted while his large hand steadied me. He changed my bandages with clinical precision, his touch careful enough that I barely felt it. And he was always watching me, not in a creepy way. It was more like he was reading me, cataloging every expression, every tremor, every moment of vulnerability. His pale eyes tracked me across rooms like a hunter tracks prey, except the analogy felt wrong because there was nothing predatory about his attention. It felt protective, possessive in a way that should have frightened me but didn't. "Tell me about him," Ash said on the 8th day. I was sitting on the cabin's back porch, wrapped in a blanket despite the fact that it was barely 40 degrees. The pain medication had been reduced, and with it had come the return of reality, the knowledge that I couldn't hide here forever. "About Daniel?" I picked at a thread on the blanket. "About the man who left you alone enough that you drove off a mountain." I flinched. He didn't leave me alone. He chose someone else. There's a difference. Is there? Ash stood by the porch railing, looking out at the forest with an expression that seemed to hold centuries. "Tell me." So I did. I told him about meeting Daniel in college, about how patient he'd seemed, how I'd felt safe with him in a way I never had with anyone else. I told him about my childhood, my father's abandonment, my mother's neediness, the way I'd learned early, that love was something that required you to diminish yourself to deserve it. "I thought he was different," I whispered. "I thought I'd finally found someone who wouldn't leave me if I just loved him enough. And instead he left me for someone more fun, someone who didn't carry so much trauma, someone who could laugh without sounding like she was apologizing for taking up space." Ash turned to face me, and his expression was so fierce, so angry on my behalf, that something cracked inside my chest. "He was a fool," Ash said simply. "A coward, and you're going to let his foolishness define what you believe about your worth? I don't know what I believe anymore." My voice broke. I was so sure. I was so certain that this was the life I was supposed to have. And then it all just evaporated. Ash moved with that liquid grace and knelt in front of me. His large hands carefully took my good hand and placed it against his chest, right over his heart. I could feel it beating beneath my palm. Steady, strong, alive. "Some things burn away what we thought we were supposed to be," he said quietly, "so that we can become what we're actually meant to be. Maybe your car crash wasn't an ending, Elise. Maybe it was a beginning. My breath caught. His eyes had shifted, just for a moment, and in that moment they'd been shot through with gold. Liquid, living gold, like fire that moved against his pupil. Ash. I started, but I didn't know how to finish. I know, he said softly. You have questions. You sense that something isn't right about me, that I'm not entirely what I appear to be. My heart was hammering. What are you? He pulled back slowly, his expression unreadable. Not yet. You're not ready yet. But soon, Elise, I promise. When you're strong enough to hear it, I'll tell you everything. How do you know I'm not strong enough now? Because you still think you're broken. He stood, extending his hand to help me up. And I need you to understand something before I tell you the truth about me. You were never broken. You were just waiting for someone who could see you as whole. His fingers lingered against mine as I stood, and that now familiar spark of recognition jolted between us. Electric, inevitable, impossible to ignore. Neither of us pulled away. Shepturney, the visitor 2 weeks into my stay at the cabin. I realized I'd stopped thinking about Daniel entirely. That realization came on a Tuesday morning as I was sitting in the kitchen with coffee, watching Ash move through the space with the ease of someone completely comfortable in their own skin. He was making breakfast, something elaborate involving fresh eggs and herbs from the garden he apparently maintained in secret. The domesticity of it was startling. So was the fact that I didn't want it to end. You're staring, he said without looking up from the pan. My cheeks warmed. I'm observing. There's a difference. Is there? He threw a look over his shoulder that was full of amusement, and I caught it again. That flash of something inhuman in his expression. It was happening more frequently now, as if my presence was somehow eroding his ability to maintain whatever mask he wore for the human world. You still haven't told me, I said, testing the waters like I did every few days. My arm was out of the sling now, my ribs healing faster than the doctor had predicted. About what you are. Not yet. But this time there was an edge to his voice, something almost painful. There's something I need to... The sound of an engine outside cut him off. Ash went very still. It was a minute stillness, barely perceptible, but I'd become attuned to him in the way prey becomes attuned to predators, hyper-aware of every shift, every tension, every sign of danger. And this was danger. I could feel it radiating off him like heat off a stone. Stay inside, he said quietly. What's inside? Elise. The command was absolute, and some part of me that didn't belong to my rational mind obeyed immediately. I watched from the kitchen window as Ash stepped outside, and the moment he crossed the threshold, something changed about him. His shoulders seemed broader. His movements took on a predatory grace. Even his face looked different, sharper, more dangerous, like a mask had slipped. The truck that pulled up was enormous, chrome glinting in the weak November sun. 2 men emerged, one with copper-red hair, one with skin the color of dark chocolate. Both were large, both moved with that same strange, controlled grace that Ash possessed. Both looked at him with expressions of careful respect and undisguised concern. We have a problem, the red-haired one said without preamble. His voice was gravelly, textured with an accent I couldn't place. Victor's been crossing into our territory 3 times in the past week. He's testing the boundaries, Ash. You know what that means. Ash's jaw clenched. When? Last night. The Eastern Ridge. The dark-skinned man's eyes flicked toward the cabin, toward where I was standing in the window. His expression shifted when he saw me. Surprise. Then something that looked like comprehension. Christ, the red-haired man breathed. That's why you've gone dark. You've got... He stopped, visibly reining himself in. You've been bonding with a human. I watched Ash's hands ball into fists. This is not the time. On the contrary, a new voice said, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. I'd say it's the perfect time. A 3rd man emerged from the truck. Tall, blonde, devastatingly beautiful in the way that villains are in Gothic novels. But his beauty had teeth. His beauty had shadows. When his pale green eyes found me through the window, I felt a shock of predatory attention that made my skin crawl in a completely different way than Ash's did. "So you're the reason our alpha's been unavailable," the blonde man said, his gaze still locked on me. The human who survived a 100-foot drop. How improbable. Victor. Ash's voice could have frozen fire. "This is private property. My property and my personal business is exactly that. Personal. Is it?" Victor moved closer, and I could see the way the other two men tensed, preparing for violence. "Or is your personal business now a security risk? A human who knows things she shouldn't? A human who—" His nostrils flared, and his expression shifted to something predatory. "Smells absolutely delicious." I didn't remember moving, but suddenly I was outside, my body responding to something that went beyond logic. Ash turned, saw me, and his eyes went completely gold. Not flickering gold, not a moment of inhuman light. Completely, absolutely gold. The color spreading across his iris like liquid metal. "No," he said, the word carrying a weight that seemed to flatten the air itself. "You don't look at her. You don't speak about her. You don't even breathe in her direction. She is under my protection, and every law of the pack ensures that her safety is guaranteed." Something shifted in the dynamics. The red-haired man and the dark-skinned man exchanged a glance that held something like shock. Victor's beautiful smile turned razor-sharp. "Oh, this is better than I expected," Victor purred. "You've marked her. You've actually marked her. That's a claim, Ash. A mate claim. Which means this conversation is over," Ash interrupted. His voice had changed. It had become something deeper, more resonant, with undertones that seemed to vibrate in my bones. "You came to discuss territorial boundaries. I'm telling you now, the Eastern Ridge is off limits, permanently. Any pack member who crosses it will answer to me personally." "And if I cross it?" The silence that followed was profound. Ash stepped forward, placing himself between me and Victor with the deliberate movement of a wolf moving between a predator and its den. "Then you and I will finally settle what's been building since you challenged me 5 years ago." Victor's hand drifted toward his chest, almost casual, but the threat in it was unmistakable. Interesting. Very interesting. The mighty Alpha finally showing weakness, finally willing to risk everything for— "Everything," Ash repeated softly. "You have no idea what I'd risk for her, Victor. So I suggest you leave this mountain while you still have the option." For a moment, Victor didn't move. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the shifting of power dynamics. Then he smiled, an expression that was all predator and no warmth, and stepped back toward his truck. "This isn't over, Ash. The council won't accept a human mate without challenge. You know the laws as well as I do." He paused at the truck door, his green eyes finding mine one last time. "And sweetheart, when this inevitably falls apart, because it will, you should know that I'll be waiting." They drove away in a spray of gravel, leaving Ash and me standing in the cabin's driveway. His shoulders were still heaving, his hands were still balled into fists, and his eyes were still gold. I reached out slowly, cautiously, and placed my hand on his arm. "Tell me," I said quietly. "Tell me what you are. Tell me what he meant. Tell me everything." Ash turned to face me, and in those golden eyes I saw centuries of loneliness, of burden, of a longing so profound it nearly broke me. "I will," he said hoarsely. "But once you know, Elise, there's no going back. Once you know what I am, what we are, your entire life changes. Are you certain you want that?" I thought about my old life. The wedding that was never going to happen. The fiancé who chose someone else. The desperate drive that ended in a cliff. I thought about waking up in a car wreck to a wolf's golden eyes. I thought about 2 weeks of feeling for the first time like I'd found something real. "Yes," I said. "I want that. I want you." Ash's breath caught. He reached out, his large hand trembling as it cupped my face, and for a moment I thought he'd kiss me. Instead, he pressed his forehead to mine. "Then come inside," he whispered. "It's time you learned the truth about what stalks these mountains. It's time you learned about my curse, about the pack, about the blood and the moon, and the reason fate brought you to me on that dark highway." He pulled back. his eyes slowly fading from gold back to that pale gray blue. But the transformation itself had already told me everything I needed to know. I was in love with a werewolf. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like coming home. Chapter 4. The truth in moonlight ash lit the fireplace without touching it. One moment the stone hearth was dark and cold. The next, flames were dancing behind the grate, casting orange light across the cabin's living room. I watched the fire, then looked back at Ash, who stood silhouetted against the flames like a character from mythology, some ancient god or cursed being pulled from the pages of a leather-bound grimoire. "The fire makes this easier," he said quietly. "It centers me, keeps me grounded when I'm about to tell someone things that shouldn't be possible." I settled onto the couch, my healing ribs only twinging slightly now. Ash didn't sit. He paced, his large frame moving through the flickering shadows like a caged predator preparing to leap. "I'm going to start at the beginning," he said. "Not my beginning. That goes back further than you need to know. But the beginning of what matters. The beginning of the curse. Curse?" I repeated. "You're actually cursed?" "In a manner of speaking." He stopped at the window, staring out at the darkening forest. 237 years ago, a witch named Isabeau Moreau lived in the mountains near here. She was in love with a man named Matthias, my great-great-grandfather, though the exact lineage is complicated. Matthias was alpha of the pack then, as I am now. It's a bloodline thing, a power that runs through certain families. "Okay," I said slowly. "So you're telling me werewolves are hereditary?" "Not all of them. Some are created, bitten by another shifter. But the oldest bloodlines, the alpha lines, we're born to it." He turned back to face me, firelight catching those pale eyes. "Anyway, Isabeau loved Matthias with the kind of obsessive, destructive love that ruins lives. She wanted him to marry her, to publicly claim her as his mate. But Matthias was already bonded to another woman, a human actually, though she became something more once they marked each other." My throat tightened. "What do you mean, became something more?" "When an alpha marks a human as their mate, there's a binding. A soul binding. Over time, the human begins to shift with the lunar cycles, begins to develop some of our gifts. They don't become full wolves, not the way we do, but they're no longer entirely human either." He paused, letting that sink in. Isabeau didn't take rejection well. She cursed Matthias and all his descendants. She said that anyone carrying the alpha bloodline would be forever doomed to meet their fated mate, their one true connection, only to lose them. That we would watch them die, or be forced to push them away, or watch them choose someone else. Again and again, across generations, the curse would repeat. I felt something cold twist in my stomach. That sounds like mythology. That sounds like something designed to be unbreakable. It is. Ash's voice was hollow, and I've watched it happen. I've been alive for 93 years, Elise. I've seen it happen to my father, to my grandfather, to cousins I loved. I've felt the mate bond form, that instinctive pull toward someone, the knowledge that they're meant to be yours. And then I've watched circumstance, or fate, or my own choices, tear them away. Wait. I stood, my mind spinning. 93 years? But you look, we age slowly. We're born, we develop to adulthood, and then we simply are, for centuries if we're lucky, if we're not killed. He moved toward me, and there was such anguish in his expression that my breath caught. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Elise? Do you understand what it means that I feel the mate bond with you? My legs suddenly felt incapable of supporting my weight. I sank back onto the couch. You're saying you're fated to lose me. I'm saying I'm fated to suffer regardless of what happens. His voice cracked. Which is exactly why I haven't told you this until now. Which is exactly why I've been trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just attraction, just circumstance, just the novelty of finding someone in my cabin who wasn't trying to kill me. But you don't believe that. No. He knelt in front of me, taking my good hand gently. I don't. Because the moment I pulled you from that car wreck, Elise, the moment I looked into your eyes, I felt it. That soul-deep recognition, that absolute bone-level certainty that you were the one I've been searching for across centuries. even when I told myself I'd given up searching. The one the curse promised I'd lose. Tears were streaming down my face now, though I couldn't have said exactly why. So what? We have some cosmic expiration date? We're supposed to just... what? Enjoy the time we have and prepare for heartbreak? That's what I've always done before, Ash said bitterly. But that was before you. Before I realized that the curse wasn't just about loss. It was about me accepting loss as inevitable. Accepting that I didn't deserve happiness because the universe had decided otherwise. He stood abruptly, moving to the fireplace. His hands gripped the mantle, and I watched as his shoulders heaved with the effort of controlling something inside him. When he turned back, his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. The night of your accident, I was out in my wolf form. I do that sometimes, when the weight of being alpha gets too much. I hunt. I run. I feel the forest move through my bones, and I remember what it felt like before I understood the curse, before I knew what I was losing would always come. He moved back to me, kneeling again. And then you crashed, and my wolf recognized you before my human mind even processed what was happening. My wolf knew that you were mine, that the universe had finally given me something worth defying fate for. You're not making sense, I whispered. You're telling me that I'm cursed. That being with me means nothing, Ash interrupted fiercely. Or it means everything. It means that for the first time in 2 centuries, I'm willing to fight the curse, to fight the council, to fight Victor and every other shifter who thinks they have the right to keep us apart. It means that I'm done accepting predetermined suffering as truth. He reached up and cupped my face in his large hands, forcing me to meet his gaze. In those pale eyes, I saw centuries of loneliness, of loss, of a being so fundamentally alone that he'd given up believing in connection. And I saw something else too, something that looked almost like hope. I don't know how to break a curse that's survived 200 years, he said quietly. I don't know if what we have will last beyond tomorrow. But I do know that in this moment, with you looking at me like I'm something worth believing in, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to defy fate itself if it means getting to keep you. Ash, I started, but I didn't know how to finish. How could I tell him that I was terrified? That being marked as his mate meant binding myself to a man who was cursed, to a supernatural world where I didn't belong, to a future that promised nothing but pain? But more importantly, how could I walk away from him? He kissed me before I could answer. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was acclaiming, a declaration of war against the universe itself. His lips moved against mine with the desperation of someone who'd been alone for 93 years and had finally found someone worth being vulnerable for. I tasted salt, whether from his tears or mine I couldn't tell, and underneath that, something wild and primal that made every nerve in my body sing. When he pulled back, his eyes were still glistening. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Not because of fate, not because of the bond, but because you choose to, because you want to." "I choose you," I said, and meant it with every broken, healing part of my heart. "I choose this. I choose us." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of approaching snow. And somewhere in the forest, I could swear I heard the howl of a wolf, not in warning but in triumph, as if the mountains themselves were acknowledging a pact being made between a human and the alpha who loved her. The curse had never been about inevitability. I realized it had always been about choice. Chapter 5. The Marca I woke to find Ash's arm around me, his large body curved protectively against my back. We were still on the couch, tangled in the blankets he'd pulled down from the bedroom at some point during the night. My lips were tender from kissing. My body ached in ways that had nothing to do with broken ribs, and I couldn't quite remember when we'd stopped talking and started simply existing in each other's space. The fire had burned down to embers. Gray light filtered through the windows, suggesting early morning or the lead-in to snow. Ash's breathing was deep and even, and for a moment, I simply allowed myself to exist in the simple peace of it, being held by someone who'd chosen me, who'd defied centuries of curse-driven loneliness to be vulnerable with me. Then his phone buzzed. Ash stirred, his arm tightening around me reflexively before he reached for the device on the coffee table. I watched his expression shift from contentment to to something darker as he read whatever message had arrived. "What is it?" I asked. "The council," he said grimly. "They know." I pushed myself up slightly, ignoring the twinge in my ribs. "What do you mean they know?" "About you, about us, about the mate bond." He was already moving, setting me aside gently and standing to pace. His hair was rumpled from sleep, and he was still wearing yesterday's clothes, but the vulnerability from last night had been replaced with something harder. Something that looked like preparation for war. "They're calling an emergency assembly. 3 days from now, in the valley beneath Cascade Peak. What happens at this assembly?" "They determine whether our bond is permitted," Ash said, and his voice was hollow. "You have to understand, Elise. A human mate for an alpha is unprecedented in recent centuries. The bloodlines have been carefully managed, kept pure. A human contaminating the gene pool is considered..." He paused, searching for the right word. "Dangerous. Contaminating." I repeated the word like it was poison. "That's what they think of me? That's what the old guard thinks of anyone who isn't shifter-born." He moved back to me, kneeling so we were at eye level. His hands found my face, thumbs stroking across my cheekbones with surprising gentleness. "But that's not what I think of you. And I'm the alpha. I have a voice in this council. My mate claim carries weight." "What does the mate claim actually mean?" I asked. "Legally, I mean. Practically. It means you're bound to me." His eyes held mine, and I could see the struggle happening behind them. The conflict between what the world demanded and what his heart demanded. "When I marked you, when I let my scent settle into your skin and my energy intertwine with yours, I was announcing to every shifter within 100 miles that you're mine to protect. That harm against you is harm against me, that you're a member of my pack, regardless of whether you carry the wolf." I thought about that moment, the fierce kiss by the fireplace, the way his energy had felt so intense it was almost visible. I'd attributed it to emotion, to the passion of the moment, but apparently I'd just undergone some kind of supernatural bonding ritual without fully understanding it. "Is it permanent?" I whispered. "Yes." No hesitation, no softening of the truth. "You're marked, Elise. Even if you wanted to walk away from me right now, any shifter who encountered you would know that you belong to the alpha of these mountains. The only way to break the mark would be through your death or mine." The weight of that settled over me like snow. "That's a lot of pressure." "I know." He pressed his forehead to mine. "Which is why I won't lie to you. This council assembly won't be simple. Victor will push for rejection of the bond. He'll argue that you're a liability, that your human fragility makes me weaker as alpha. He'll try to prove that the mate claim was made under emotional duress, that I wasn't thinking clearly. Were you?" "No," Ash admitted. "I was thinking with my heart for the first time in nearly a century. But that doesn't make the mark any less real. That doesn't make what I feel for you any less true." A knock on the door interrupted whatever I would have said next. Ash's entire body went rigid, and I watched as something shifted in his expression, a calculation, a weighing of odds. He stood, and when he opened the door, I saw the red-haired man from before, the one who'd come with Victor's warning. "Rowan," Ash greeted, his voice carefully neutral. "This is early for an informal visit. I came to warn you." Rowan's eyes, a striking copper color, found me on the couch, and his expression filled with something that looked like sympathy. "Victor's already been to 3-pack territories, telling everyone that you've lost control, that you've let a human infiltrate the mountain and cloud your judgment. He's arguing that the mate claim is invalid because it violates the old laws about human-shifter bonding." "There are no such laws," Ash said coldly. "Exactly. Which means the council will have to create precedent when they rule." Rowan stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I came to tell you that you need to prepare her. The assembly won't be gentle. They'll question her about the bond, about her intentions, about whether she's strong enough to be Alpha's mate. And Victor..." Rowan paused, his expression darkening. "Victor plans to formally challenge you for leadership if the council rules in your favor." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "A death challenge?" "Possibly." Rowan looked uncomfortable. He's been gathering support. There are younger wolves who think Victor's ambition is exciting, who question whether an alpha so openly defiant of tradition is strong enough to lead. If he can paint you as compromised by human sentiment, if he can prove that you've put personal desire over pack welfare— I would never compromise the pack, Ash interrupted. But there was a thread of doubt in his voice that hadn't been there before. I believe you. Rowan moved to stand by the window, staring out at the forest. But belief isn't the same as proof, and the council will demand proof. They'll want to see that this human— he glanced back at me— that Elise is worth the risk, that she's worth potentially fragmenting the pack over. Ash's hand found mine, and I could feel him trembling slightly. What would constitute proof? That's the thing. Rowan's expression was troubled. The old law exists for a reason. Humans are fragile, short-lived, vulnerable. They don't have the strength to bear an alpha's true mark without cost. That cost is usually— He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Death. Or transformation. No. Ash's voice was absolute. Absolutely not. I won't— It may not be your choice, Rowan said quietly. If she carries your mark fully, if she accepts it completely, she'll begin to shift with you. Slowly, carefully, but it will happen. The question is whether her human body can survive the transformation. I felt Ash's grip on my hand tighten almost painfully. When would this start? With the full moon. Rowan checked his watch. That's in 5 days, right after the council assembly. He left shortly after, having delivered his warning. Once we were alone again, Ash pulled me into his arms, and I could feel him shaking. Not from fear, I realized, but from rage, at the council, at Victor, at the world for daring to demand proof of what should have been ours by right. We don't have to do this, I said quietly into his chest. We could leave. We could run, and spend the rest of your life looking over our shoulders. He pulled back to look at me. No, the only way through this is forward. But Elise, his voice cracked. If the transformation is too much, if your body can't handle the shift, then we find another way, I finished firmly. You didn't come back for me in that crash just to lose me now to fear and what-ifs. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to pour certainty into me through sheer force of will. And I kissed him back, pouring my own certainty into the space between us. The certainty that I'd chosen this, that I'd choose it again, that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Outside, the first snow began to fall, and somewhere in the distance, I could swear I heard the sound of wolves howling, not in triumph this time, but in warning. The mountains were holding their breath, waiting to see if a human could survive becoming something more than human, waiting to see if love could be strong enough to defy not just curse, but the very laws of nature itself. Chapter 6. Before the storm, the next 2 days were suspended in a strange, crystalline quality of time, as if the universe had paused to let us exist in the space between what was and what would be. Ash taught me everything. We spent the first day in his study, surrounded by ancient books and journals written in languages I couldn't read, but somehow understood through Ash's translations. He showed me sketches of transformation sequences, explanations of pack hierarchy, diagrams of something called the bond resonance, the magical frequency that connected all wolves in a given territory to their alpha. When you shift, he explained, running his finger across a detailed illustration of a human form in mid-transformation. Your consciousness remains intact. You don't lose yourself to the animal, the way popular fiction suggests. Instead, you gain additional senses, additional instincts. You become more aware, more powerful, more connected to the earth and the magic that runs through it. And if my body rejects the transformation, I asked quietly, then we stop. His hand found mine, squeezing gently. The moment I sense that it's too much, that your human form can't handle the shift, I'll anchor you back. I won't lose you to this, Elise. I won't. But his eyes held doubt. We both knew that for a human to carry an alpha's mark, to truly be his mate, some level of transformation was inevitable. The question wasn't whether it would happen. The question was whether survival was possible. That evening, as snow continued to blanket the forest outside, Ash held me through the night. Not with passion. though I could feel the tension thrumming beneath his skin. Instead, with a tenderness so profound it broke my heart. His lips pressed against my hair, my forehead, the pulse point in my neck where his mark had settled. A faint silver scar in the shape of teeth that seemed to glow faintly under moonlight. "I can feel it," I whispered. "The mark. It's like having a second heartbeat right here." I placed my hand on the mark, feeling the warmth beneath my palm. "Is that normal?" "It's perfect." His voice was rough with emotion. "It means the bond is taking root, that your body is beginning to accept what you are to me." "What am I?" I asked. "Everything." He pulled me closer. "You're the exception to 2 centuries of curse. You're the reason I haven't given up on hope. You're the woman who crashed a car to escape heartbreak and somehow found herself in the arms of a monster. And instead of running, you chose to stay. You're not a monster." "Not to you," he agreed. "But to the council? To Victor, I might as well be. I'm an alpha who broke tradition, who chose love over law, who's willing to let his pack be divided rather than abandon his mate." On the morning of the assembly, there was a knock at the cabin door. When Ash opened it, I saw 2 people, Rowan, the red-haired shifter, and a woman I'd never seen before. She had dark skin and eyes the color of amber, with her hair braided intricately and adorned with silver charms. She wore the bearing of someone who was used to authority. "This is Kira," Rowan said. "She's the council mediator. She asked to speak with you both before the assembly." Ash's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside to let them enter. Kira moved through the cabin with the ease of someone who'd spent time in pack spaces before. She settled onto the couch across from where Ash and I sat, Rowan positioning himself near the window, not quite part of the conversation, but present as witness. "I've reviewed the binding," Kira said without preamble. "The mate mark is legitimate. Properly sealed, properly recognized. Which means," she looked directly at me, "you carry an alpha's claim now, whether you understand all the implications or not." "I understand," I said quietly. "Do you?" Her amber eyes were sharp. "Do you understand that if you reject him before the bond fully cements, it could fracture his connection to the pack? That the wolves are bound to their alpha through a kind of magical contract, and if that's disrupted, it could cause physical pain to everyone in his territory." "She won't reject me," Ash said, his hand finding mine. "You can't know that," Kira replied, not unkindly. "Which is why the council exists, to ensure that bonds of this magnitude are entered into with full understanding and consent from both parties." She turned to me again. "During the assembly, you'll be asked questions about your intentions, about your willingness to bear his mark fully, about your readiness to transform. Your answers will determine whether the council permits this union to continue." "And if they don't?" I asked. "Then the mark must be broken," Kira said. "And the process of breaking an alpha's mate mark is not pleasant for either party." "They won't break our bond," Ash said with absolute certainty. "Victor will argue for it," Rowan interjected quietly. "He's positioned himself as the guardian of tradition. He's arguing that if we allow human mates, we compromise the bloodline, weaken the pack, invite human weakness into our sanctuary." "Has he found support?" Ash asked. "Some." Kira's expression was carefully neutral, but not majority. Most of the council remembers the old stories, the humans who were marked by Alpha and became something extraordinary, something powerful. Your mate mark could prove precedent for a different path forward, or it could be used as evidence of Alpha instability. She stood to leave, but paused at the door. "My advice? Show them that she's strong. Not physically, she'll never match a shifter in raw strength, but emotionally, spiritually. Show them that whatever is between you is worth the risk. Because right now, all they see is an Alpha compromised by sentiment. Give them reason to see something else." After they left, Ash pulled me close. "Are you afraid?" "Terrified," I admitted. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I can't convince them?" "Then we leave." His voice was absolute. "This pack, this territory, the council, all of it. We leave and we build something new, somewhere else. I've lived 93 years, Elise. I've been Alpha for 40 of them. But none of that matters if it means losing you." "You'd give up your pack? Your position? For you?" He cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his gaze. In a heartbeat. I've spent a century thinking that duty and responsibility were more important than happiness. The curse taught me that was a lie. I won't make that mistake twice. That afternoon, we drove to the valley beneath Cascade Peak. The landscape was transformed by snow, pristine and beautiful and somehow terrifying in its vastness. The assembly ground was a natural amphitheater, surrounded by towering pines and stone formations that looked like they'd been carved by ancient hands. Dozens of shifters were already gathered, standing in small groups. Some watched us arrive with curiosity, others with open hostility. I could feel their eyes on me, cataloging me, judging me, questioning what a human could possibly offer an alpha that would justify defying centuries of tradition. Ash's hand never left my back as we walked toward the center of the gathering. His touch was both anchor and declaration, a public statement that whatever came next, he was claiming me, supporting me, standing beside me. Victor was waiting at the center of the circle, his pale green eyes gleaming with something that looked far too much like anticipation. "Shall we begin?" he said, his voice carrying across the valley. "I believe we have some laws to discuss regarding the purity of the bloodline, and an alpha's fitness to lead when he chooses a human mate over the protection of his pack." Ash's arm tensed beneath my hand. Around us, the assembly fell silent, waiting. The real challenge was about to begin. Chapter 7. The trial Kira stepped forward, her amber eyes commanding immediate attention. The shifters arranged themselves in a rough circle, creating a natural arena. Ash and I stood at the center, with Victor positioned directly across from us, a perfect triangle of power and opposition. We gathered to address a formal challenge to the legitimacy of the mate bond between Ash Nightstalker, alpha of these mountains, and Elise Summers, human. Kira's voice carried the weight of ritual, of centuries of protocol. "Victor Kane, you have called for this assembly. State your objection." Victor stepped forward, and even in daylight, with dozens of witnesses surrounding us, he managed to look like a predator approaching wounded prey. "The objection is simple. An alpha who takes a human mate compromises the pack. Humans are fragile, short-lived, inherently weak. This mark," he gestured dismissively at the scar on my neck, "will fracture our bloodline and weaken our territory. The Council has a responsibility to protect the integrity of the pack. I demand the mark be broken and the bond be null." "On what legal grounds?" Kira asked. "Ancient law, pack preservation clause. An alpha's mate must be capable of bearing strong offspring and defending pack territory. A human cannot do either." I felt Ash's breath catch. He was about to respond, but something made me step forward instead. Every eye in the gathering shifted to me, and I realized that in that moment, I had a choice. I could let Ash fight for me, could hide behind the protection of his status and power, or I could fight for myself. "I have a question," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If the law requires a mate to bear strong offspring and defend territory, what about human mates who were marked by previous alphas? Are you saying they all failed? That the bloodline was compromised every time?" A ripple went through the assembly. Kira's expression shifted to something that might have been approval. "That was different," Victor said smoothly. "Those were ceremonial marks, temporary bonds that never meant to produce offspring." "How do you know?" I continued, warming to the argument. "Did you ask them? Or did you simply assume, based on the fact that they were human, that they couldn't possibly have value?" "They didn't survive the transformation," Victor snapped. "Some of them did," a voice called from the crowd. I looked over to see Rowan stepping forward. My great-grandmother was marked by Ash's grandfather. She survived 7 transformations. She bore 3 strong cubs. She lived to be 98 years old, far longer than most humans. I'm standing here today because of that mark, because of that bond. If the law you're citing is meant to protect the pack, then it's protected me and my bloodline multiple times over. Others began to speak up. shifters with human heritage in their lineage, wolves whose packs had been strengthened by alpha mates who were once human. The narrative Victor had constructed began to fracture, but then Victor smiled, and that smile was cold enough to stop every voice. "How touching," he said. "But none of that addresses the real issue. The real issue is that this alpha," he pointed at Ash, "is compromised. He's allowed sentiment to override duty. He's making decisions based on desire rather than what's best for the pack, and I'm not the only one who sees this weakness." He transformed. It happened in seconds, his form rippling. Like water, bones cracking and reforming, pale skin giving way to silver-white fur. The wolf that emerged was enormous, muscles corded and deadly. Around the circle, other shifters began to transform as well. A show of force, a statement that Victor had brought allies. "I formally challenge you for leadership," Victor snarled, the words still intelligible despite his lupine form. "We settle this in blood. If you're strong enough to keep your human mate, then you're strong enough to defend your position." Ash's hand tightened on my back. I felt him begin to shift, felt the magic rising in him like a tide. But I grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at me. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet. Elise, trust me." And then I did something that should have been impossible. I closed my eyes and felt for the mark on my neck, that silver scar that connected me to him. I traced it mentally, following the thread of magic that bound us together. It pulsed with energy, with Ash's power and my own fragile human determination. I opened myself to it. The pain was extraordinary. It felt like fire blooming across my skin, like every nerve ending suddenly becoming aware of an existence it had never known before. My body convulsed, and I heard Ash shouting my name, felt him trying to pull me back from whatever edge I was approaching. But I didn't want to be pulled back. I dove deeper into the mark, deeper into the bond. And as I did, I felt something extraordinary begin to happen. The scar on my neck began to glow, not silver anymore, but gold, liquid, molten gold that spread across my skin like living light. My fingertips began to shimmer. My eyes, I could feel them changing, becoming something other than human. I wasn't transforming into a wolf. I was becoming something else entirely. Something that was neither human nor shifter, but a perfect balance between the two. Something that existed in the space between worlds. The assembly fell silent. Victor's wolf form suddenly seemed smaller, less formidable. Because what I'd become, what the mate bond had allowed me to become, was something he couldn't categorize or dismiss. I was marked, powerful, and completely unfamiliar to centuries of pack law. "I am Elise Summers," I said, my voice carrying harmonics it had never contained before. "I carry the mark of an alpha. I accept the full weight of this bond, and I will not be dismissed as weak." The golden light faded slowly, and my form returned to human. But the mark on my neck was different now. It glowed faintly with that same golden light, and when I looked at Ash, I could see the shock and wonder in his expression. "This is unprecedented," Kira breathed. "In all recorded history, I have never seen a human respond to a mate mark this way." "It's impossible," Victor snarled, still in his wolf form. "It's a trick." "It's love," I said simply. "It's me choosing this bond completely, without reservation, without fear. Your law requires a mate to be strong. I am strong. Not like you, but in ways that matter. And that should be enough." Ash pulled me close, and I could feel him trembling. "How did you—" "I don't know," I admitted. "I just felt you. Through the mark, and I knew what you needed me to be." Kira stepped forward, her expression grave. "Victor Kane, do you wish to proceed with your challenge? Are you willing to fight an alpha who carries a human mate? Because the precedent here is clear. This bond is legitimate, and her strength is undeniable. Victor shifted back to his human form, and I saw fury and calculation warring in his expression. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "The council may accept this aberration today, but mark my words, it will end in tears. The curse doesn't break that easily, Ash. And when it claims her, you'll wish you'd never met her." He disappeared into the forest, followed by his allied shifters. In the silence that followed, Kira approached us. "The council votes to accept and protect this mate bond. All those in favor?" Hands rose throughout the assembly. A few withheld their votes, but the majority was clear. We were accepted. Legally, officially, publicly accepted. As the assembly began to disperse, Ash pulled me aside. "What you did, opening yourself to the mark that way, you've accelerated the transformation process. The full moon is tonight, Elise. Your shift will happen tonight." I looked up at him, seeing the fear and love warring in his expression. Then we faced it together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. And somewhere, in the mountains, I could feel the pull of something ancient and powerful. The call of the wolf that lived now, dormant, in my blood. The real test was about to begin. Chapter 8. The First Moon. We returned to the cabin as darkness fell. The full moon was rising over the mountains, enormous and luminous, pulling at something deep within my bones. The pain had started an hour after the assembly ended, a dull ache that began at the mark on my neck and spread through my body like roots seeking soil. "It's time," Ash said quietly, helping me out of the truck. His voice held a tremor I'd never heard before. Fear. He was terrified. "We need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can't hurt yourself if the transformation becomes violent." He led me to a large stone chamber built into the hillside behind the cabin, a natural cave that he'd reinforced over the years. The walls were smooth, the floor covered in soft moss and blankets. It smelled like pine and something wild, something that made the wolf inside me stir with recognition. "This is where I shift," he explained, helping me sit. "The stone contains your magic, contains the transformation. It won't hurt you, but it will keep the shift contained if things get difficult." "How difficult?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Some humans don't survive the first transformation." He knelt in front of me, his hands gentle as they found my face. "Their bodies can't handle the magical restructuring. They shift once and it tears them apart. But you," he pressed his forehead to mine. "You're different. You're already part shifter now. Your body is already changing. I can feel it through the mark." The pain intensified, radiating outward from the scar on my neck. I gasped, gripping his shoulders as my skin began to tighten across my bones. "Ash, I'm here," he whispered. "I'm right here. Let it happen. Don't fight it. Surrender to the change that I'm scared. I know, but you're stronger than you know." He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, the corner of my mouth. "Let me show you." He stepped back and shifted. It was faster than I expected, his human form rippling like water, bones cracking and reforming, skin giving way to deep charcoal fur marked with streaks of silver. The wolf that emerged was enormous, but his eyes remained the same pale gray blue, still recognizably him. He nudged his massive head against my chest, and the moment his fur touched my skin, the connection through the mark intensified. Suddenly I could feel everything he felt. His heartbeat, his breath, his absolute certainty that I would survive this. His magic wrapped around me like a shield, supporting me, anchoring me. The pain became something else. Not agony, but transformation. My muscles began to reshape themselves. My bones hollowed slightly, becoming less brittle, more flexible. My senses exploded. Suddenly I could smell the earth beneath the cave, could hear the heartbeat of a mouse in the walls, could taste the mineral quality of the stone around us. I tried to scream, but the sound that emerged was something between a howl and a cry. My body convulsed and I felt myself beginning to change. Fur erupted across my skin. Not the dark charcoal of Ash's wolf form, but something different. silver and gold, shimmering in the moonlight that streamed through a high cave opening. My face elongated, became something between human and beast. My hands became paws, but retaining just enough dexterity that they didn't feel entirely alien. I was caught between worlds. The pain crested, peaked, and then, suddenly, it released. My new form settled into place, and I understood. I wasn't a full wolf like Ash. I was a hybrid, a chimera, something that existed in the space between human and shifter. Smaller than Ash's wolf form, but more graceful. Powerful in a different way. Ash's wolf form pressed against me, and I understood his relief through the bond. I'd survived. My body had accepted the transformation. Tentatively, I got to my feet, or paws. My balance was strange, but not impossible. Ash nudged me gently, and together we moved to the cave opening. The full moon hung directly overhead, and something in my chest responded to it. A pull that felt almost ecstatic. Without conscious thought, I ran. We moved through the forest like wind, like magic, like two parts of the same being. Ash's wolf form stayed close, and I could feel him monitoring me, checking that my new body was holding up to the demands of running at supernatural speed. But I felt alive in a way I'd never known was possible. Every sense was heightened. Every moment was vivid and crystalline and real. We ran until we reached a clearing, and I stopped, throwing back my hybrid head and letting out a sound that was part howl, part human cry. It felt like joy. It felt like coming home. Ash shifted back to human form, and I panicked slightly until I realized I could still shift too. The process was smooth this time, my body reforming from hybrid to human in seconds. I stood in the moonlight, naked and gasping, and Ash pulled me into his arms. "You did it." He breathed into my hair. "You survived. You're alive, you're whole, I'm yours." I finished, tilting my head back to look at him. "I feel it, the bond. It's so much stronger now. I can feel everything you feel. Then you feel this." He kissed me with a desperation that tasted like tears and relief and gratitude. "You feel how much I love you, how terrified I was, how grateful I am that you're still here." We made love under the full moon, our bodies intertwined, the bond between us burning so brightly that I could see our connection as actual light, golden threads linking us together, binding us at the deepest level. It wasn't gentle. It was raw and primal and overwhelming, a physical manifestation of everything we felt for each other. Afterward, we lay in the clearing, wrapped in blankets Ash had brought from the cave. My head rested on his chest and I could hear his heartbeat. Steady, strong, alive. "The curse," I said quietly. "You said when the transformation was complete, the curse might finally break." "It might," Ash agreed. "But Elise," he pulled back to look at me. "Even if it doesn't, even if the curse still has power over us, I don't care. I would live through 1,000 curses if it meant getting to keep you." I was about to respond when I felt it, a shift in the energy around us. Not Ash, something else. Something vast and ancient and wrong. Ash felt it too. He sat up suddenly, pulling me close. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." "What?" I asked, fear creeping back into my voice. "What is it?" "The curse," he said grimly. "It's not breaking, Elise, it's awakening. And it's brought something with it." From the forest, I heard the sound of howling, but not like the pack's howls. This sound was wrong, discordant, agonized, and it was coming closer. "We need to get back to the cabin," Ash said, already moving to dress. "Now! What's happening?" "The curse doesn't just take through loss," he explained as we ran back through the forest. "It also punishes defiance. And he glanced at me, his expression grave. "We justified it completely. By surviving the transformation, by completing the mate bond, we've challenged the curse's power, and curses don't take that lying down." The cabin came into view, and behind us, the forest had gone silent. That silence was somehow worse than the howling had been. Ash pushed me inside and locked the door. Through the window I could see movement in the trees, shapes that were almost wolf, almost human, but somehow neither. Curse things, manifestations of the very magic that had haunted him for 2 centuries. "They're here for me," Ash said, checking weapons I didn't know he had. "For us." The curse wants to prove it still has power. Can we fight it? I don't know, he admitted. I've never been strong enough to try. But with you... He turned to me, and his expression held something that looked like hope. With you, maybe we finally are. The scratching sounds began at the door. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The scratching intensified into something more purposeful. Not animal claws, but something between claws and hands, tearing at the wood with methodical precision. I could feel it through the bond with Ash, the curse's hunger, its rage at being defied. What are they? I whispered, watching as the door began to splinter. Echoes, Ash said grimly. Manifestations of everyone who lost a mate to the curse before you. Ghosts, essentially, but made of magic instead of spirit. They're angry. They want to pull you into the same suffering they've endured. The door gave way. What emerged was horrifying. A creature that looked like it had once been human, but was now something twisted and broken. Its skin was translucent, revealing the bones beneath. Its eyes held infinite sadness and infinite rage. It didn't move like it had joints. It moved like water, like smoke given terrible purpose. Ash shifted into his wolf form, placing himself between the creature and me. But more kept coming, 5, 10, 20 of them, pouring through the broken door like a tide of anguish made manifest. Run! Ash snarled at me. Get to the back! But I didn't run. Instead, I closed my eyes and felt for the hybrid form that had awakened inside me during the transformation. I could feel it responding to the danger, responding to Ash's need. I shifted, faster this time, easier. The world exploded into sharper focus. Colors became more vivid. The echo's presence became almost tangible, visible as distortions in the air around them. I lunged at the nearest echo, my hybrid form stronger and faster than I'd anticipated. My claws, which I didn't remember having in human form, raked across the creature, and it shrieked, a sound like glass breaking underwater. The echo didn't bleed. Instead, it dispersed into wisps of dark smoke. Elise, be careful. Ash's voice came through the bond, suffused with both terror and pride. But I was already moving. The adrenaline, the supernatural strength, the absolute knowledge that I would not lose this man to a 200-year-old curse, it all combined into something primal and powerful. I fought like I'd been fighting all my life. Like the wolf inside me had centuries of combat experience encoded in its very DNA. We moved through the cabin like violence itself. Ash's wolf form was devastating. He was larger, stronger, more experienced. But my hybrid form was faster, more adaptable. Together we were unstoppable. The echoes kept coming, an endless tide of magical manifestations. But with each one we dispersed. I felt the curse's power weakening slightly. Then one echo was different. It moved with purpose, with intelligence. As it took shape in the center of the cabin, I recognized something in its features. The elegant bone structure, the way it moved with predatory grace. It solidified into the form of a woman, beautiful and terrible, with eyes like burning coals. Isabeau, Ash breathed, shifting back to human form. His voice held recognition and centuries of anguish. The echo of the witch smiled. Did you think love could break what I made? Her voice sounded like wind through dead leaves. Did you think a human and her supernatural lover could defy the magic of a woman who loved so fiercely she cursed bloodlines? The bond you share is nothing, Ash. It's a flicker of light before the eternal darkness. She will die. They always do. And you will suffer, forever, knowing you brought her to this end. I felt Ash's despair through the bond, felt the weight of 200 years of loss pressing down on him. But I also felt something else, my own certainty, my own refusal to accept that narrative. I shifted back to human form and stepped forward. You're right, I said quietly. Love isn't enough to break a curse. Elise, Ash started, reaching for me. I held up a hand, keeping my eyes on Isabeau's echo. You're right that I'll eventually die. All humans do. But you're wrong about something fundamental. You cursed him to lose his mates because you couldn't accept his choice. Because love for you meant possession. But what Ash and I have? I turned to look at him, seeing the fear and confusion in his expression. It's not about possession. It's about choice. It's about choosing each other, every single day, knowing that nothing is guaranteed. That's not weakness, Isabeau. That's the only real strength that exists. I turned back to the echo. You want to know what breaks your curse? It's not some magical act. It's accepting that love and loss aren't enemies. They're partners. They exist together. Ash loves me knowing I could be taken from him. I love him knowing I might not survive transformation. And we choose that anyway. That's what's unbreakable. Isabeau's form began to crack, splinters of dark energy radiating outward. No, she hissed. That's not... Yes, I interrupted, and I could feel the bond between Ash and me burning brighter, burning so intensely that it filled the entire cabin with golden light. It is, and I think on some level you always knew. That's why you cursed him, because you couldn't have what he has now. Someone willing to love him not despite the curse, but through it. Someone willing to face infinity with him. The echo of Isabeau shattered into 1,000 pieces of dark smoke, but as it did, I felt something extraordinary happen. The golden light from our bond reached out and touched each piece, transforming them. The dark smoke became something else, not light exactly, but something like peace. The echoes of the past mates began to dissolve, not in agony, but in what looked almost like relief. The scratching at the door stopped. The manifestations retreated. Silence fell over the cabin, broken only by my ragged breathing and the sound of Ash moving toward me. He pulled me into his arms, and I shifted back into human form as he did. He held me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality, his entire body shaking. You did it, he whispered into my hair. You broke it. You actually broke the curse. We broke it, I corrected. Together. But even as I said it, I felt a strange sensation moving through the bond between us. Not pain exactly, but something like a door opening. A locked door that had been sealed for 200 years suddenly swinging wide. Ash pulled back to look at me, his eyes widening. Do you feel that? What is it? It's... He trailed off, wonder and confusion warring in his expression. I can feel my bloodline, not just my own life, but the lives of everyone before me, everyone the curse touched, and his voice broke. They're at peace now, because you freed them, Elise. You freed all of them. I felt it too then, through the bond, the overwhelming gratitude of centuries of tormented souls, finally released from the curse's grip. It felt like the world taking a breath after holding its breath for too long. But there was something else too, a presence that had been masked by the curse's power, now suddenly visible. An ancient magic, older than the curse, older than Ash's bloodline. A power that had been waiting for someone strong enough to awaken it. Ash, I said slowly. What was the curse protecting? His expression shifted to something I'd never seen before. A knowledge that went beyond what he'd been conscious of. Something buried so deep that even he hadn't realized it was there. I don't know, he said, but I think we're about to find out. Outside, the moon had reached its apex, and somewhere deep in the mountains, something ancient and powerful began to stir. Chapter 10. The Awakening. We didn't sleep that night. We couldn't. The bond between us had transformed into something almost tangible, a constant hum of connection that made it impossible to tell where Ash's consciousness ended and mine began. Through it, I could feel his memories, not all of them but fragments, centuries of moments, of loss and love and the burden of leadership, and underneath it all, something else. A knowledge he didn't know he had, a truth buried so deep in the genetic memory of his bloodline that it had required the curse's breaking to access it. We need to go to the sanctum, Ash said as dawn broke, painting the damaged cabin in shades of rose and gold. His voice sounded strange, layered with echoes of other voices, other versions of himself across centuries. What's the sanctum? A place that's been protected by the curse for 200 years. It's where Matthias, my great-great-grandfather, hid something before Isabeau's magic took hold. He moved to the window, staring out at the forest. His hand found the mark on my neck, tracing it gently. The curse wasn't just designed to torture me, Elise. It was designed to keep me weak enough that I could never access what he left behind. The curse ensured that I would be so burdened by loss that I'd never have the strength to reclaim our heritage. What heritage? I'm not sure yet, but I can feel it now, through the bloodline connection. It's calling to me. He turned to face me, and his eyes held something ancient and powerful, and it wants to meet you. The hike to the sanctum took us through parts of the forest I'd never seen, deep into the mountains, past the tree line, to places where the earth itself seemed to thrumming with magic. My hybrid form remained partially active as we traveled. I could feel it humming beneath my skin, waiting for a moment when it might be needed. The sanctum was hidden behind an optical illusion, a wall of glamour magic so sophisticated that Ash had to guide me directly to it. When we passed through, the world shifted. Suddenly we were standing before an ancient stone structure, carved into the mountainside itself. It looked impossibly old, older than anything the human world had built, with architecture that didn't quite follow the rules of normal geometry. "How long has this been here?" I whispered. "Since before humans recorded time," Ash said. He approached the entrance slowly, reverently. "This is where the first alphas learned to shift, where the original bond between human and wolf was forged. This is the source of everything we are." The doors opened at his approach. Inside, the air was different, charged with magic so old and potent that it made my hybrid senses sing. The chamber was vast, with walls covered in symbols I somehow understood despite never having seen them before. Knowledge was flowing into me through the bond with Ash, ancestral memory making itself known. At the center of the chamber stood a figure. For a moment, I thought it was another manifestation, another echo from the curse. But as my eyes adjusted to the strange light, I realized it was a statue, carved from stone so ancient it looked almost translucent. It depicted a woman with her hands outstretched, her face frozen in an expression of profound sorrow. "Ophelia," Ash breathed, "the first alpha's mate." I moved closer to the statue and felt something shift inside me. Through the bond, I could suddenly see her story, not told in words, but in images that bloomed directly into my consciousness. I saw her meeting the first alpha, saw their bond being formed. I saw them learning to transform together, learning to blend human and wolf nature into something new. I saw her dying in childbirth, her human body unable to survive carrying a hybrid child. I saw the first alpha's grief become so overwhelming that it fractured reality itself. "He cursed his own bloodline," I said, understanding flooding through me. The original curse. It wasn't Isabeau's curse. It was his. He cursed himself and all his descendants because he couldn't bear the loss. "Yes." Ash's voice was hollow, and when Isabeau came along 200 years ago, she found the curse already in place. She weaponized it, used it to punish him for not choosing her. But the core magic, the core pain that came from him, that came from love so powerful it broke the world. I turned to face Ash, seeing him clearly for the first time, not just the man I loved, but the repository of 2 centuries of anguish, the living embodiment of a curse that had started with one man's inability to accept loss. "You can undo it," I said suddenly. "The original curse. Now that you understand where it came from, now that you see it for what it is, a reflection of that first alpha's pain, you can choose differently. You can break the cycle." "How?" "By accepting what he couldn't." I moved closer, taking his large hands in mine. "By accepting that I will eventually die. That loss is inevitable. That grief and love aren't opposite forces. They're the same force, experienced at different points in time. By choosing that, fully and completely, you break the pattern." Ash's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so afraid of losing you." "I know. And you will eventually. We all die, Ash, even hybrids like me now. But that doesn't make what we have less real. It makes it more precious, more urgent, more necessary." He kissed me then, and the kiss was different from before. It wasn't desperate or fierce. It was gentle, reverent, full of acceptance. And as we kissed, I felt the magic in the sanctum shift. The statue of Ophelia began to glow. The symbols on the walls came alive with light, and suddenly I could see something I hadn't seen before. A mural, hidden until this moment. It showed the future. Not a fixed future, but possibilities. I could see versions where Ash and I were old together, where we'd built a life that lasted. I could see versions where I died and he grieved and eventually found peace. I could see versions where we were torn apart by choice or circumstance, but in all of them, we were together. In all of them, the love we shared transformed the world around us. The mural faded, and Ash pulled back to look at me. "The curse is breaking," he whispered. "Can you feel it? The entire bloodline is healing." I could feel it. Through the bond, I could sense the ripple of change flowing through the pack, through the mountains, through the very foundation of shifter magic. Centuries of pain were being transmuted into something else. Not happiness, because that would be disrespectful to the real losses that had occurred, but into acceptance, into peace. A new voice filled the chamber, not spoken aloud, but resonating directly in our minds. Calm, ancient, infinitely sad, thank you. It was the first alpha, or what remained of him after centuries of magical suffering, for choosing differently than I did, for showing that love doesn't require the death of the beloved, for breaking the cycle I created. "What happens now?" Ash asked aloud. "Now you live." The voice was fading, dispersing like morning mist. "You live and you love and you build something new. You are no longer bound by my pain. You are free." The presence withdrew, and Ash and I were alone in the sanctum. I felt him sag slightly, the enormous weight that had been pressing on him for 93 years finally lifting. "We should return to the pack," he said quietly. "They'll feel the change. They'll need to understand what's happened." "Will they accept it?" I asked. "Yes." His voice held absolute certainty, because the change isn't coming from me forcing new rules on them. It's coming from the breaking of magic that's been constraining all of us. Every shifter in these mountains will feel the curse lifting. They'll understand what you've done. We emerged from the sanctum into late afternoon light. As we walked back through the forest, I could feel the mountains themselves shifting, breathing out in relief. The ancient magic was dispersing, returning to the earth, to the sky, to the natural world that had been holding its breath for 200 years. By the time we reached the cabin, news had already spread. Shifters were gathering. Not in the hostile way Victor's pack had gathered, but with curiosity, with cautious hope. They could feel the change. They could sense that something fundamental had transformed. Kira was waiting at the cabin entrance, her amber eyes wide with wonder. "The curse," she said simply. "It's gone. After 200 years, the Alpha's curse is finally broken." "How?" Ash looked at me, and in his expression I saw love and gratitude and the beginning of a future that wasn't constrained by ancient pain. "A human mate," he said, "who was willing to love me not despite the curse, but through it." And as the pack began to understand what had happened, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning.